Okay, let's just dive right into this. In today's explainer, we are decoding a highly esoteric, honestly remarkably intense piece of text. I mean, it's a dense, metaphorical map that just mashes together psychology, theology, and criminal justice. It's a wild ride for sure, but we're going to make sense of this chaos together. Let's see what it might actually teach us about destiny, free will, and, well, the human condition. Right out of the gate, the text hooks us with a genuinely bizarre scenario. Picture an FBI officer interrogating a rat. I know, wild, right? But the author uses this highly unusual framing to pose a fundamental question. Did the rat actually learn from the experiment? It's basically a test of the law of rewards and suffering, the idea that our behavior is reinforced by rewards and modified by suffering. The text is asking if human psychology, specifically the psychology of criminals, can be understood just by looking at a rat in a maze. It's a jarring way to start, but it perfectly sets up the whole analysis. To navigate all this, we'll use a sort of metaphorical elevator. We'll start with the rat and the observer, then move up to the human drama triangle, look at criminal minds and judgment, explore God's divine experiment, and finally reach perfection and divine protection. Okay, first floor, the rat and the observer. Let's look at the physical limitations. This brilliantly sets up the core dichotomy of the whole text. On one side, we've got the rat in the maze. The text states the rat is tortured with electric shocks, suffers, and ultimately dies because its DNA can't be copied. But on the flip side, we have the human observers. They're the ones recording the rat's life on camera. The author draws this direct parallel, suggesting that just like the rat learns through physical shocks, we humans learn through our own versions of persecution and dealing with authority. Now, here's where things take a deeply surreal, theological turn. Even though the physical rat is dead and its DNA fails, the text asserts that the soul of the rat actually learned from all that suffering. It claims this soul evolves, reincarnates as a human, reads the Bible, and eventually meets the conductor of the experiment. Why? Well, to seek justice from the Father in heaven for the torture it endured. The massive takeaway here is that suffering isn't the end. The author views it as a catalyst for the soul's evolution across lifetimes. Moving our elevator up a floor, we hit Section 2, the human triangle drama. This represents the psychological cage we're supposedly living in right now. To really grasp this worldview, we have to look at a pretty well-known psychological concept, the drama triangle. The text leans heavily on this model, where people constantly bounce between three roles: victim, rescuer, and persecutor. And the argument here is that we are fundamentally trapped in this behavioral loop. According to the text, the absolute only way to break this exhausting cycle is to actively forget our enemies. It breaks down exactly how this loop traps the mind. First, it claims that just being reminded of someone who hurt you in the past is enough to instantly reboot that drama triangle. Boom, you're right back in. Second, it points out that the fear of bodily injury or death causes a shift, basically turning the victim into a persecutor. Because of this endless cycle, the author concludes that clinging onto minds that persecute is not wise. It just creates an infinite loop of fear and judgment. Let's go up to Section 3, Criminal Minds and Judgment. We'll see how this psychological cage shapes our institutions. So, the text maps out a really unconventional view of criminal trials, breaking it down to three roles. First, authority figures, like psychologists, who are obsessed with justice and basically infuse suggestions into human minds. Then you have criminals, who are driven by fatal attractions. They force interactions just to participate in games and prove their own righteousness. And finally, victims. The text describes victims in a super unorthodox way, even likening them to Satan, because it argues that the mere existence of a victim intrinsically creates another victim in this endless chain. Basically, humans in trials are just viewed as sinners trapped in predestined transactions. I really want to highlight this specific quote: the need of an observer to judge the judge. It perfectly captures the text's intense skepticism of earthly authority. Think about it. If everyone, including the judge and the psychologist, is trapped in that drama triangle, earthly justice is totally flawed. So, the argument goes, we absolutely need a higher observer to step in and judge the judge. Which brings us to Section 4, God's divine experiment. We're jumping from the courtroom straight to the cosmic level. The author lays out a stark, literally uncompromising vision of divine determinism. The text says, God plays dice, pointing out that while some enjoy life, others become victims. But the overarching premise, everyone is a slave in God's experiment. In this cosmic view, our minds are just projections. The text claims we simulate scenarios specifically to give answers to God's questions.
We are essentially just data points in a grand, inescapable cosmic test. Crazy, right?
It's a lot of dense philosophy, but here is how the text stacks the hierarchy of consciousness. At the very bottom is the mind, which is completely trapped in destiny, just simulating answers. If the mind manages to evolve, it moves up a step to the observer. This is a higher consciousness that simply watches the game play out. And at the very top is the initiator of transactions. This supreme level is driven by a core need, and it's what actually starts the entire game of existence.
All right, final floor. Section 5, Perfection and Divine Protection. Let's look at the ultimate escape.
The author distills human existence down to two extreme binary outcomes. It's totally black and white. On one hand, if the projection of Earth shifts toward persecution, death is absolutely certain at the hands of earthly authorities. But on the other hand, if Earth shifts toward perfection, humans become wise and actually receive divine protection directly from the creator of Genesis. It's a very rigid view of salvation versus destruction.
But then, right in the middle of these massive cosmic theories, the text drops this incredibly specific, highly idiosyncratic anecdote. The author claims that when Earth shifts to perfection, their Eve Summer from America playing golf is waiting in heavens. It's such a fascinating, deeply personal image of paradise, and it contrasts so wildly with all that heavy talk of predestination and persecution. It really shows how unique the author's vision of salvation is. However, that personal vision of heaven is heavily weighed down by intense paranoia about the earthly realm. The author claims to be actively observed by authorities, calling them criminals and contract killers. They even claim that for the right amount of money, these authorities will take a life through legal persecution. It is a highly paranoid framework, but it perfectly closes the loop on the author's deep, deep distrust of earthly justice. Which leaves us with a massive question to ponder. We've gone from a tortured rat in a maze to reincarnating souls through the drama triangle, all the way up to God playing dice with human slaves. The text insists we are completely trapped in predestined transactions dictated by a cosmic initiator. So if everything is fundamentally predetermined, can the mind ever truly break free and evolve? It's an incredible tension between free will and absolute determinism, mapped out in a truly unique way. Think about that the next time you feel stuck in a loop. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the maze around you.